whether it was riding a gondola in Venice or seeing the Colosseum and the Vatican in Rome, or swimming and laying on the beach in Barcelona, or being able to see the Eiffel Tower, being above the clouds on a mountain in Switzerland. Those are such special memories. And as faculty members, I think that we can facilitate those kinds of experiences for students, and it's going to be one of the best experiences we can give them.
Welcome to the Power of PennWest. I'm your host, Dr. John Anderson, president of PennWest University. Whether you're a current student, a proud alum, or just curious about the PennWest community, welcome. Please stay tuned as we explore the stories, achievements, and experiences of the people who bring life to our campuses in California, Clarion, Edinburgh, and online. Welcome to the Power of PennWest podcast. Buckle up because we are hitting the road for this episode of the Power of PennWest podcast. We are taking a trip with PennWest students and faculty as we explore the unique opportunities of studying abroad. Traveling abroad and learning about other cultures allows PennWest students and faculty to gain a global perspective, enhance their academic experience, and develop cultural awareness and adaptability. Our three guests today have participated in short and long-term trips to other countries to expand their research horizons, foster international collaborations, and become more well-rounded. Dr. Melissa Gibson, professor and graduate head of PennWest's master's program in corporate communication, has led trips abroad to European countries such as Spain, Italy, and Greece. She'll discuss her travels and how she incorporates teaching experiences into the classroom. Dr. Gibson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Anderson.
Next, we have Allison Dobrinsky, who studies history, pre-law, theater history, and literature at the California campus. She was one of 23 PennWest students to travel to Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Norway to discover the rich and cultural history of Scandinavia. Allison, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, our third guest for today, we have Maddie Carey, an art education major and honors student at the Edinburgh campus. To fully immerse herself in her academic program, Maddie spent a semester in Greece, studying the art, architecture, and history of the region. Maddie, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I have been looking forward to this conversation, looking forward to hearing from all three of you. Dr. Gibson, let's start with you. What prompted your interest in helping take students from Western Pennsylvania to the far reaches of the world?
Actually, I had a colleague who in 2017 suggested that we lead a trip to Italy and Greece, with Greece being the birthplace of the communication field. And I was not nervous because my colleague was an adept traveler. So I thought everything was going to be great. And then the week after she invited me and suggested that we do this, she retired. So my very first experience was taking a group of 35, which at the time was the largest number of travelers on a short-term study abroad program at the Edinburgh Legacy campus. And I was absolutely terrified to have 35 people traveling. But it turned out to be such an amazing experience that I organized 2 more trips after that. So I had programs in 2017, 2018, 2019, and then I had an amazing trip scheduled for 2020 that included students from 2 local high schools, faculty, staff, current students at the university, and then we know what happened with that with COVID. But when I look back on the trips that I have led, I honestly think it's probably one of the best experiences that I've had as a faculty member in 30 years in higher education.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you, Dr. Gibson. Allison, let's hear a little about your experience. What was it like heading to a new set of countries on the other side of the world?
Crazy. I was nervous, but I'm really ambitious and outgoing, so I was excited to experience it. It was a little rocky getting there, but I jumped in. I had just left a relationship that I felt like was holding me back. And so it was kind of like a spur of the moment a couple months before the trip even set off. I signed up and I was like last minute doing it. So it was all like just happening really fast. But I really enjoyed it. And it was really life-changing.
Thanks, Allison. I look forward to hearing more about that experience. Maddie, you went for the long haul. You were gone for, I think, a full semester. It's a bold step.
I had been like looking into like study abroad experiences through the university and I hadn't like really found any that stuck out to me. And then I got home from winter break and my mom was like, I found the absolute perfect program for you. And I was like, okay, I got home an hour ago. Can I breathe? Um, but she was absolutely right. I went for 3 months, most incredible months of my life. I agree with Allison, definitely a life-changing experience. I have some experience traveling mostly with my mom, but I had never like solo traveled before, and I wasn't like fully alone, but it was scary.
What was it like when you finally decided to do it? You got everything lined up and you're sitting on the plane, about ready to take off. Did you have that feeling that's just like, what am I really getting into?
Yeah, definitely. I watched a lot of movies on the plane there. It's like a 10-hour flight, so I had a lot of time to kind of process everything. And then I got off the plane and I was like, "Oh my God, I have to actually like do this now. This is no longer some like abstract thing that's going to happen. It is happening now."
That's great. So, talk us through the academic side of that semester abroad. Which classes did you take there that transferred back, and how did that work?
I had a lot of help through like the global education office and also my academic advisor in figuring out, okay, this can count for this, I can transfer this here, and all of that. So I only ended up taking one class that didn't really transfer back, but I took painting, photography, Cycladic arts and culture, goddesses of ancient Greece, and Greek 1. And Greek 1 was just learning the Greek language, and that is my only class that didn't transfer back, but I had a really awesome experience with all of that.
Allison, tell us how you first became acquainted with the opportunity to study abroad at Penn West.
I had a friend in a class that I had been seeing for a while. We just kept matching up classes and we were walking, I don't even know where one day. And I was like, "Do you know about that trip to Scandinavia? Do you know anything about it?" And they were like, "Yes, I'm going. You should go." And I was like, "Okay, if you're going, I know one person. I'll go." So that was it. That was the confirmation.
Dr. Gibson, talk to us about the process of setting up a trip and then how you recruit students to have an experience like that.
There are a couple of different ways that faculty members set up trips, either through a third party vendor like EF or through a homegrown process. So, for example, my colleague, Dr. Tim Thompson, has led a homegrown trip to Scotland for the past 20 years. So, in 2023, my daughter, who is a college student, we traveled with Dr. Thompson. And so he's done the same trip for 20 years and has everything all arranged and things of that nature. But for faculty members who are interested in putting together a trip, working with a third party vendor takes some of the pressure off of, for example, making the arrangements and the travel and the hotels and things of that nature. So the very first trip that I did was with EF, and we picked, a 14-day trip that would allow us to see two countries. And I have to say that it was one of the easiest processes because my job then, rather than focusing on the logistics, I was in charge of recruiting students. The other thing that I want to point out is that a lot of these short-term travel programs, anyone can go. So much to the dismay of some of my college students, once they told their parents that they could bring a guest, mom or dad decided to come along. So I think some of the students were thinking, okay, that takes some of the fun out of it. But it was really enjoyable to see, parents traveling with their students, with their kids, and that was one of the highlights of the trip. But once we, get some interest across campus and the study abroad program really sells itself. Students are very interested. I would try to set my trips up a year in advance, and I would tell students, this is the time where you tell mom, dad, and Aunt Ethel, and everybody else that you'd love a monetary donation for Christmas or birthdays to your trip. So students started to set up their own little fundraisers, and it gave them time to be able to have things in place to be able to go. And honestly, I think students were just so excited about this opportunity. I tell parents, in fact, at admitted student days, I am speaking to students and to their parents, and I tell them specifically about short-term study abroad because I say to them, this is the safest travel you will ever have. I laugh because sometimes students will say, when I graduate, I'm going to backpack across Europe alone. And I say to them, haven't you ever seen the movie Hostel? It's not necessarily the best idea. So I think that parents feel safe about sending their children on trips that are led by faculty and staff who have experience, and a third party vendor or a homegrown travel program that is safe and secure. So that's the process that I've gone through as a faculty member on my end, Dr. Anderson.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Dr. Gibson.
We'll be right back after this message.
At PennWest University, we're making college make sense again for people who maybe thought college wasn't the answer. We're making college practical with programs tied to in-demand jobs that prepare you for success right away. We're making college accessible by breaking down barriers and offering more choices. We're making college approachable with faculty who understand where you're coming from and help you get where you're going. At PennWest, we're making college valuable again for people just like you. Learn more at pennwest.edu.
Maddie, you had mentioned earlier that you had traveled some with your mother. Had you ever been out of the country before?
Yes, my mom is from Germany, so we've gone back to visit her folks like a handful of times. I've been a couple other places with her, and then after I graduated high school, we actually went to Greece for I think a week or two. So I'd been to Greece before. I hadn't been to the island where I stayed, but I'd done Athens before. I'd seen the Acropolis. I was a little bit familiar, but there were still a lot of new things.
I'm sure. Tell us a little about the island you stayed while you were there.
Paros is in the Cyclades island chain. It's near Naxos. There's also Antiparos, which is just kind of like a tiny little baby island, like a 15-minute ferry ride from Paros. Around mid-October, all of like the other tourists left, which was really interesting to see everything wind down, all of the really touristy shops and spots kind of closing, and just really get a feel of like what it's like to be there as a local, even though you're definitely not a local by any means after like a month. It's a really beautiful little island. If anyone listening ever has a chance to go, I say go. It's beautiful. The water is so clear, careful of sea urchins on some beaches, but the locals are so nice. There's so many sweet cats everywhere. It's really awesome.
And what university did you work with or study at while you were there?
I studied with HISA, the Hellenic International Studies in the Arts. It's like a very small program. I was there with 5 other students.
Oh, that's great. Allison, tell us about your trip. We talked earlier about the countries you visited, but walk us through that experience.
So we got to Pittsburgh International Airport. We boarded on the plane. We hopped about 3 plane rides to get there. And that was my first time leaving the country. So that was interesting in itself to make tiny connections and get to the physical country in itself, and then first walk in. I think we spent about 12 to 13 days there. Each country was its like new little place, unique. They're so close, but they're so unique once you're inside of them. We basically got a taste of every country throughout the way. We stayed at different places. We got to run around in groups during some free time, besides seeing like the main monuments that we usually saw, or the museums or some special places that we ate at. We got to experience other things. Like we went out one night in Denmark to an Irish pub karaoke bar. And then we got to go to hot dog stands and food tours, hang out in libraries, which was the coolest thing to me. We did a ferry, and the ferry wasn't a ferry. It was a cruise ship, a mini cruise ship. So that was cool in itself. So much, and I loved it all.
Tell us a little bit about what you learned there that has helped you in your studies when you got back. Did it give you a different perspective leaving the country for a period of time?
It did. I think in those short days, it went by so fast. I learned a lot about food culture. One, that's kind of what I was studying when I went over there. I was writing a paper on the food of Denmark and comparing it to southwestern Pennsylvania. I also learned a lot about government. I had no intentions to do that, and like public life and different things. Definitely changed my perspective on things like public transportation, public libraries, everything that a government could provide for you. I thought was really neat, and what you could do with it. And I sometimes now kind of push for cooler libraries because of it. So we just visited some really neat ones.
That's great. Maddie, did you get a chance you were there for quite some time. Did you get a chance to study the difference in society or legal structure? Was there, when you got over there, did you expect to see things that were similar to the United States that you found to be different in any way?
I think that like overall there's a lot of differences. I remember doing some like studying on like the Greek political structure. I feel like the approach in a lot of European countries at like as with Greece is a lot more laid back in a lot of ways. We befriended a girl that took a painting class at the university that I studied with. Her family's British, but she's lived on the island since she was like a little child. And one of my classmates was like, "Oh yeah, I brought like a doorstop so that no one could break into my room." And she laughed because she's like, "That's not going to happen. No one's going to break into your room. Like you could leave your doors open, your windows open. No one's gonna get you. Like it's so safe." And I remember our Greek teacher on like our last day of class, we were asking her all these questions about like, oh, like if I broke my arm, how much would that cost? If I blah 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 blah. And I just remember sitting there thinking, man, I should have like broken a bone or something. I should have like taken advantage of like all of these little things that like are priced so much differently here, I guess. And then they have one jail cell and that's just one. And they don't have there's just it's a small island, so there's a lot of differences from like mainland Greece to the islands, but just a very different approach overall, I think.
Thank you, Maddie. Dr. Gibson, talk to us a little bit about preparing students to leave the country. So when you have a group of 10, 15, 20 students, do you do some kind of onboarding to prepare them for what they'll see when they get there?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I realized early on is that students have different backgrounds in terms of how much they've traveled. So, for example, Maddie said that she's traveled to other countries before. But one of the things that I noticed is that I had some students who had never been on a plane before. And I remember distinctly one student who her first domestic flight was from Pittsburgh to Atlanta. And then her first international flight was Atlanta to Barcelona. So it was, part of my job to help those individuals who've not traveled a lot to be able to do so and be comfortable. And what I did early on was create a really extensive handbook for them, answering all the questions. And then we would have sessions, at the beginning of the recruitment process to a couple weeks before we boarded the plane and left. And, I think the more you can give people in terms of resources and answering their questions, the more comfortable they're going to feel in the process. And I guess that was part of my motivation for doing this, is that I know that there are a lot of first generation college students. I was a first generation college student and I didn't have opportunities to travel abroad. And so being a faculty member, I think that was definitely a motivation for me, that I wanted to help students to see the world in a safe way. I think a lot about a quote from the late chef and travel writer Anthony Bourdain, and he said, "Travel changes you." And that's something that always has stuck in the back of my head since he said that. Travel changes you. And I think that being able to help our students and community members and other people to see other parts of the world, it changes them in terms of how they experience the world, how they look at our own country and our own history and culture and communication patterns and things of that nature. So I have always taken that very seriously, that part of my job is to help people see the world and that it also will change them in positive ways.
Oh, that's great. Excellent. Allison, talk to me about one other area of these short-term study abroads. Often when you go, you may have a friend going, you may have a roommate going, but get stuck with a group of people you may not know and haven't met before. Did you make friends that you hadn't seen before on this experience you had?
Yes. So there was one person I'd seen before. We weren't even close. So when they encouraged me to go with them, I barely even knew them. And then the rest, the 20 some rest, the professor, everyone there, I never met them before in my life until I got to that airport and we all met up. And within the first plane ride, I had made a friend and we've hung out after. Me and that professor, I feel so close now to them, especially because Dr. Madden, took good care of me when I was on the trip because when we arrived in the first night, I woke up really sick. I wasn't feeling good for the first time. Wasn't feeling good at all for those 12 days there. And then I had lost my grandfather when I was on the plane on the way there. So I had just this rocky start, but nothing was going to deter me getting there and enjoying it. Like nothing could like take my happiness away. I was going to enjoy it no matter what. Everyone on that trip was just so caring. They always checked up on me. I feel so close to them, even like just 12 days. I don't get close with people within a week. And now I like look at those people and I'm like, I feel like I have such a strong shared bond between them. Even if I don't see them all the time, I'm still like, I know them. Like we were great friends on that trip. But I just will forever remember that group. It was so enjoyable, funny, unique characters. And you get real close when you're spending the night with each other, feeling really sick. And so
That's great. It's fun you had those connections. Maddie, are you still in contact with people you studied with over in Greece?
Yes, I have multiple group chats with mostly just two of the girls, but we all keep in touch. I love stalking them on social media. I was thinking earlier about how much I miss some of them earlier today.
That's great. Great. Those friendships last for sure. As we prepare to wrap this up, I'd like to hear from each of you. If you were giving advice to a student who was thinking about participating in a study abroad, either a short-term or long-term study abroad experience, or Dr. Gibson, if you were thinking about talking to a faculty member who was considering sponsoring or leading one of these experiences, what advice would you give to that faculty or student as they deliberate the options before them? Dr. Gibson, why don't we start with you?
I will address the faculty since I think that Maddie and Allison can do the others to students, but I would say to faculty members, I know it might feel daunting to lead a trip like this and to be responsible. It is a huge responsibility, but I think that we have lots of resources at PennWest to help you. And whether you create a homegrown type of trip or whether you use a third party vendor, that you have a lot of people who will support you. And it could be former faculty members who have led these trips. It could be the global education area, whatever it might be. There are lots of resources. Don't let that deter you from leading an amazing trip. And when I think about all the things, like all the things that I've been able to show students, whether it was riding a gondola in Venice or seeing the Colosseum and the Vatican in Rome, or swimming and laying on the beach in Barcelona, or being able to see the Eiffel Tower, being above the clouds on a mountain in Switzerland. Those are such special memories. And as faculty members, I think that we can facilitate those kinds of experiences for students, and it's going to be one of the best experiences we can give them.
Maddie, tell us about your advice to someone considering an experience like the one you had.
I think I would just say that I know it's scary, but just do it. You have to do it scared. You got to do it scared.
And Allison?
I would say definitely go and do it because it is once in a lifetime sometimes for people, and it's worth taking it now. And you might come back having the most amazing hot dog at this hot dog stand one day, and then forever trying to share your joy of hot dogs with people because of this hot dog you had one day. I mean, it is, you would not believe how life-changing it is just in these like random one-off moments that you're like, I'm just gonna go try a hot dog today. And then you come back and you and everyone else can't stop talking about this hot dog that you had. So just go because you will experience something so life-changing, and it'll really change a lot of perspectives going on.
That's great. Let's finish with one question. You all have been to multiple countries. You've seen lots of parts of the world. Where is the prettiest place you've ever seen? If you were to say every person in the world needs to see this, what would that place be? I'm sure everybody's getting out their notepad ready to write down the place that they should see if they get a chance to go overseas. Maddie?
I'm gonna be boring and just say Greece, just like the clear blue water, the white buildings. It's just I haven't seen anything better. I mean, I love a good mountain, I love a good forest, but there's just something special about crystal clear blue water, nice sandy beach, sunny sky.
Thank you. Allison?
I would say Stockholm, Sweden, venturing those cobblestone streets, seeing the flower vendors, sitting in a beautiful coffee shop. It's straight out of a movie.
That's great. Dr. Gibson?
That's a tough one because I've seen so many beautiful places. I think Barcelona, Spain is an absolute beautiful city, but I have to say that Lucerne, Switzerland, and being above the clouds in Switzerland is an amazing experience. So that's tough. Lots of beautiful places in the world. And I just hope that students get a chance to see some of those beautiful places.
Thank you. There's very few people who get the chance to see the world from above the clouds. Well, Allison, Maddie, Dr. Gibson, thank you so much for joining us today on the Power of PennWest podcast and sharing your experience with long-term and short-term study abroad. We appreciate all of you listening in, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Power of PennWest podcast.